Stan says, he identifies as a woman and wants to claim rights as a woman, and if he's not allowed to, even to claim the right to go through biological processes that only women can go through.
In 1977.
Exactly.
People have been laughing at it for years.
Yeah.
And now people are saying, well, I shouldn't be saying it. And the answer is you don't deprive a lot of other people of laughter. Just because you don't have that sense of humor, it doesn't mean you can impose your sense of humor on other people. And I think that one of the greatest problems we have is the literal-minded. People don't talk about this, but the literal-minded people are people who can only understand things literally. So that, if you can believe this, they don't get irony. It's like half of America does not get irony. Well, how can you say that you're getting full meaning out of life if you don't understand irony or metaphor or simile or comic exaggeration? You take it all literally. The answer is you're missing out on a huge amount of life. And I'm sorry that that's the case, but don't try and make other people miss out on the same bits of life that you don't understand.
But I'm wondering about this scene in particular. I've been curious to know how it came about, because it deals with what has become perhaps one of the most contentious issues of contemporary culture, was to do with sex and gender identity. How did it come about? How did you think
Well, how does it come about that we wrote it so long ago?
Yeah.
Well, because it's a obvious product of a certain cast of mind. A certain rather puritanical cast of mind, which basically says you have to agree with us or else you're a bad person.
It's oppression, which is what
that's right.
says.
Yes, if you disagree with me, you're oppressing me.
Yeah.
It's absolute rubbish, and it's against all that's best in Western culture. And yet people take it seriously, and I really don't know why. I think it's because people do get worried about offending other people. And we had in the 60s, when we had the best television in the world, we had a director general called Carlton Brown. I think it was Carlton Brown. And he said there are some people you would wish to offend. I wouldn't go quite that strongly, but it's absurd that people can say, you can't say that because it upsets me.
Yeah.
You have no right to say that to me. If you are upset, go away and be upset like grown-ups.
The politics of sex and gender identity, does that interest you today?
It bewilders me.
Right.
And one of my problems is that all the people I mix with in show business and all my friends and everybody, cab drivers, none of them understand this new trend towards, in the past, there have been periods when people have treated homosexuality as a crime, which is awful and ridiculous. But there are other times when people just accepted that there were clearly people attracted to their own sex. And so we don't talk about it much, and it's fine, and good luck to them, and let them get on with it. And that seems, you don't need to do that now, because there's no sense of disapproval about it anymore, except by the fundamental religious people.
Right.
And what you've got is a set of views which are now totally accepted by everyone. Same-sex marriage, wonderful idea. A lot of my friends, male friends in particular, seem to be have children and look after them just as well as any ordinary heterosexual couple would.
On the scene from Life of Brian, there was an event in the UK just last week which underlines how much that scene also speaks to current sensibilities. And so just last week, Britain's highest court ruled that the legal definition of the word woman refers to biological sex. So if you're born biologically female, then you're a woman. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think in every sense they should have the same rights as anyone else. There should be no discrimination at all. But when you get down to some things like sports, I think that where a man has become a woman, It's not fair in most sports that they can compete, because if you're born a man, then you have almost certainly a stronger body to start with than a woman who's born a woman. And to have them compete, I think, is unfair on what we would probably call cis women, right? Mm. So, I mean, I think that they shouldn't have exactly the same rights, of course, and there should be no disapproval. But when it comes down to one or two purely legal things, I think it is much better that that High Court decision has taken place.
You've talked about this a bit already, but I wonder why you think some people are threatened by humor and satire. And that's not new. In the 70s, when Life of Brian was released, it was advertised here in Sweden as the film that's so funny it was banned in Norway.
That's right, yes, I'd forgotten that.
So why do you think some people are... actually feel threatened, not just offended, but threatened even by
I think
jokes?
It's because we have tried to make life too easy for everyone. You can't say that life is easy. But parts of life are great, but everybody goes through periods when their lives are very, very difficult. And incidentally, they often say to me, thank you for helping me through difficult times, because when things get difficult, to be able to laugh, something about it changes people's attitudes to the situation they're in, and they're able to cope with it better. It's how so many people say, thank you for helping me through difficult times.
It's a release, right?
It's a release, and it moves us to a more positive part of themselves. I mean, Paddy Ashdown told me that there was a story about the Royal Marines, and during the Second World War, at one point, they were bombed by their own planes. And one of them got very angry, and the officer said, if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined up. And everyone laughed, and somehow that lifted them just at that moment into a more positive frame of mind where they could cope with things better. But I think if you protect everyone, if you have, for example, the whole point of sports in my day was not to win, it was to develop sort of character so that if you lost, you could cope with those feelings of losing, and you learned how to lose. And most of the time, most people lose. Only a few people win. But that was part of the training, was to take it sportingly, and above all, not to cheat. It was worse to cheat than it was to lose. And I think that was very good, old-fashioned character-building stuff. But if you say, oh, we mustn't have any winners or losers, I'm sorry, this is not life. As the Buddhists say, it's 1,000 sorrows and 1,000 joys. Life is very mixed, and you need to learn how to deal with the difficult and hard bits. And you can't do that if you're not allowed, as a child, to deal with those things. Life is too rough if you haven't had a chance to learn how to deal with those things. You would hardly think I was a comedian, would you?
No, it's getting a bit too serious. But in your current stage show, which you're here in Sweden with now, you joke about various peoples and cultures and nationalities.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. But are there any taboos that you wouldn't breach? Anyone that you wouldn't poke fun at?
I'd be more careful at poking fun and how I poke fun about some people.
Like who?
Donald Trump says about a lot of Mexicans and South Americans that they're rapists, and it's insane. But I wouldn't go into that area because it's almost insulting to people's intelligences. But there's a Mexican joke I like, which is that there's a U.S. a patrol boat out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Thank you very much, the Gulf of Mexico. And they suddenly see these two guys in a little rowboat, you see. And so they zoom over to them and they say, what's going on? And two little Mexicans, they say, well, we're invading America. The patrol boat the guy laughs and says, what, just the two of you? And he says, oh, no, we're the last ones. The others are already there. Now, that's a sort of I like that joke because there are a lot of Mexicans in America, and incidentally, I knew them very well because I lived in Santa Barbara, where for some extraordinary reason there were no black people, but half the people were Mexican, and delightful, hard-working people, never complained, never see a Mexican begging. Very impressive. Never see them begging. So there are certain jokes you can make about them. There's lots in America, which is not an unkind joke. But if it is suggested they were, what, as Trump says, rapists or something like that, that would be a terrible joke to make. You see, if you make jokes about people, it all depends. Are you making them for humor, like the ones I was last night? When the audience laughed at the Italian jokes, it wasn't because they hated Italians. It was just that it was a funny, good joke about Italians, you know? And if it's done with warmth and affection, then it's fine. It's only if it's nasty, if it's done not for the purpose of humor, but to hurt and make people feel bad about themselves. If it's done for that reason, then it's completely wrong and we shouldn't do it.
I saw an interview with you on the Bill Maher show, and you talked about this, who you can and can't joke about, and he talked about, he had a Muslim joke, and you talked about the fact that it's difficult in these times perhaps to
well, the trouble about making jokes about Muslims is they might kill you. That, you know.
Are you being serious, or?
Well, I'm just trying to think of the name of that wonderful writer who was attacked on stage. And
Salman Rushdie?
Salman Rushdie, yeah. You know, now lost the sight of his eye. Well, that was because he said something that a Muslim didn't like, and they have this feeling that super sensitivity about things like the book, which I don't think is in any way rational. And but I wouldn't make jokes about it because I'd rather not have my eye put out.
Right. And so, does it lead to self-censorship, do you think, among...
Well, it can, yes, but every comedian at any time of their lives have always been operating some kind of self-censorship, doing all sorts of things. Is this funny? And if they find it funny, that means it already satisfies a lot of requirements.
You had lots of good Jewish jokes last night.
Finnish?
Jewish.
Oh, yes. Well, half my friends are Jewish, the other half are gay, according to my daughter. So I make a lot of jokes like that. But what I find is, you see, when in the old days they called homosexual men, in quotes, queer. I always thought queer was a nasty word. I thought it was a hard-edged, and queer means odd or strange, so I'd never say queer. Now you find that they're calling their own organizations queer. Yeah. So, you know, and 50 years ago, if you said, fuck, the traffic stopped. Now, if you said the N-word, traffic would stop, but you can say F as much as you want. So you got to see it in a wider context. This is all about human behavior, and it's not, it mustn't be taken literally.
Hej, Staffan Dopping här, poddredaktör på Kvartal. Tack för att du tittade. Om du gillade det här klippet så klicka på gilla-knappen och skriv gärna en kommentar. Vi är nyfikna på vad du tycker. Och prenumerera också på vår kanal så missar du inte när det kommer fler klipp. Visste du att Kvartal inte bara finns på YouTube? Vi publicerar också fördjupande poddar och texter om vår tids mest brännande frågor. Lyssna och läs på kvartal.se. Men glöm aldrig, tänk själv.